here with my good friend Diana. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very good, and we've got a special guest, an unexpected guest, science dog.
Yeah, this is Pedro, and he is my thesis support dog. So he comes into the office and just hangs out with me and keeps me company.
Do you bounce ideas off of Pedro?
No, he's not that good at that side of it.
Okay, so so is an undergraduate, sort of.
No, he's a full professor now.
Oh, he's a full professor. Well, you could be getting yourself a little lab coat, couldn't you? Not all professors wear lab coats. Don't ever forget that. So, now we're here in your office at Flinders University, and we're going to talk a bit about your work. But before we do that,
Yeah.
I want to know just briefly, how did you come to be sitting in here? You're working on finishing your PhD, is that right?
Yeah.
How did that? Did you want to do this when you were a kid growing up? I want to be a paleontologist, or was it?
Well, I was, as you're hearing from a lot of others around here, I wasn't one of those dinosaur kids. But I was an animal kid, like I just loved any sort of animal.
Science dog.
Yeah. And I was always for conservation as well. So before paleontology, I worked in conservation. I also worked on building sites as a tiler. And then I came back to uni, fairly late in the piece, and discovered paleontology.
So what was it? So and you're right, there are a lot of people, and I think to be a paleontologist you need to be a lover of animals and wildlife, because what you're doing is you're going back in time to look at animals from the past.
Yeah.
So what was it when you came here that you went, it's those ones I want to do more study on?
I think for me it was the conservation aspect, because the time frame that I work in is fairly recent, being late Quaternary. So the stuff that I work on has got implications now for conservation, because we're often talking about what is essentially a fairly modern kind of fauna in the later stages of the Quaternary. So
for those that don't know Quaternary, so we're looking at animals, some of which are still around today.
Yeah.
And here in Australia, so kangaroos, wombats, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But layered upon that was another layer of animals, wasn't it? A whole bunch of creatures that are no longer with us.
Yeah, there was the megafauna species, which are animals like Diprotodon, which was like a giant wombat-like creature.
And yeah, important to remember, because people will go, oh, it's a giant wombat. It's not, is it?
It's not a wombat.
It's a wombat-like.
Wombat-like.
Sort of, a bit like a wombat, but huge. And so, tell us what, I suppose, what got you into the particular specialty that you're doing, like with your PhD, and to tell us about that side of things. And obviously, there might be some things you can tell us about your PhD and some things you can't. So
that's right, yeah. Well, I'm a palaeo-ecologist, so that means that what I want to look at is ecosystems of the past. That includes how all those different parts of the ecosystem fit together, how they interacted. But for me, I'm specifically interested in how the faunal component of those ecosystems was responding to past changes in its environment. So this is things like climatic changes, even includes the arrival of humans in Australia as well.
Yeah, and things like, so when humans arrived, the introduction of more fire, those sorts of things, those sorts of impacts. And so I guess you're right, that there is a really interesting connection when we look back at how climates have changed in the past.
Yeah.
And we know that climates have changed in the past, but we can also work out what it is that's caused them, isn't it? In the same way that we can work out what's causing climate to change now, and we go, yeah, no, it's us. Like,
yeah,
it's us now.
Yeah. So if we're going to be able to protect our fauna through the climate changes that are coming up now, or that are happening around us now, I should say, one of the best ways that we're going to be able to do that is to look at how these animals responded in the past. And then we're going to be able to, we're going to have a much better idea of predicting what they're going to do and what we can do to help them through the climate crisis.
Because of course knowledge is power, isn't it?
Oh heck yeah.
It is. Being armed with knowledge and science gives you that. So if you were to list a couple of things, without giving anything away from your PhD, but if you were to list a couple of things that we ought to be doing, that we've learned from the past, that we're not quite on top of yet in terms of looking at saving ecosystems. And I think because it's fascinating that you talk about studying the ecosystem and not just the individual animal. So what are some things, or a couple of things, that we could be doing or doing better?
Well, I think one of the more obvious things in modern times is, of course, the control of feral animals. But also we need to be aware of things like habitat connectivity as well, because in the past, if you've got populations of animals that are migrating to follow climatic envelopes, they were a little bit more able to do that because, you know, we didn't have cities and roads and fences and agricultural land in the way, whereas now we've got a lot more barriers to dispersal and migration. It's
that thing, isn't it? People often say, well, there's a population of, and just picking a random number, there's 30,000 koalas. There isn't. There might be 300 populations of 100 koalas. And it's like, it's island biogeography, isn't it? In a way, you're learning about how islands operate.
Yeah, how patches
and patches, and because the 100 koalas there, there is a city in the way, so they are now a separate population.
Yeah, and they can't disperse as easily with all the barriers.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So the other thing we've talked about in all of these interviews, of course, and because we've called them the Mary Annnig interviews.
Yeah.
And for some of the people I've spoken to, they didn't learn who she was until they've come and started studying paleontology. For some others, she was a very important person early on, and all of the things in between. So this is a very important woman in science.
Certainly.
And a very important person in terms of the beginnings of the study of paleontology. So where does she fit in for you in all of this?
Well, I think I first came across her, I used to have an interest in folk music and folk tales, and I think I first came across her in the context of, you know, she sells seashells by the, but then of course I became more aware of her as time went on, and certainly, you know, coming to Flinders and doing paleontology, I've learned more about her. As for where she fits in, well, I think she's a good example of the sort of change that we need still in paleontology. You know, she had to fight the system, and she didn't receive the recognition at the time that she deserved. And I think women still need to keep doing that now.
Absolutely.
Some things have changed, but not everything's changed.
There is a long way to go, and we hope that the interviews that we're doing with some amazing women in paleontology is helping to share some of those stories. So thank you so much.
Thank you
for the conversation. Science Dog, for those that are wondering, is over there by the door, making sure nobody comes into the office while we're possibly asleep. Yeah, Science Dog's. Oh no, Science Dog's just moved his head up. So anyway, thank you so much, Diana, and cheerio.